Clockmaker's Secret. Hello, I'm Jay Nichol of Nichol Investigations, and this is an Ontario Cold Cases Canada's true crime podcast. Fictional episode of Whodunnit Wednesdays. Go back to the golden era of detective fiction and enjoy stories in the tradition of the greats of writing, from Agatha Christie to Raymond Chandler to John Creasey. These are short stories. I hope you enjoy. Part 1. The Perfect Plan. Reginald Coldham was a man of exacting precision, much like the clocks he meticulously repaired. His shop, Coldham's Clockworks, was nestled on a quiet street in the quaint village of Marlow, where time seemed to move slower. For years, Reginald's methodical nature had earned him a reputation as the village's most reliable and rather dull resident. But underneath his unassuming exterior lay the mind of a man who had meticulously planned a murder. Reginald had always been envious of his elder brother, Horace Coldham, who had inherited the family estate and the wealth that came with it. While Horace lived in luxury at Coldham Manor, Reginald toiled away, repairing timepieces. The injustice gnawed at him for years until he devised what he believed was a foolproof plan to eliminate his brother and claim what should have been his. Horace's life had become a routine, as predictable as the clocks in Reginald's shops. Every Thursday evening he walked through the woods behind the manor to a nearby pub, the Red Lion. Reginald had timed it perfectly. Horace always took precisely 12 minutes to cross the woods. Reginald's plan hinged on this regularity. He had acquired an antique hunting rifle, untraceable, as he had bought it from a collector in an obscure auction. Reginald's plan was to intercept Horace in the woods, dispatch him quickly, then return to his shop. With no witnesses and no apparent motive, Reginald was confident he would avoid suspicion. The night finally came. It was a cold, moonless Thursday, and Reginald was ready. He positioned himself in the woods, rifle in hand, hidden behind a cluster of trees. He waited for the sound of Horace's footsteps on the gravel path. Sure enough, at exactly 7:45 p.m., his brother's familiar steady gait approached. Reginald took aim, his hands steady, and fired. Part 2. The investigation begins. The village was abuzz with shock the next morning. Horace Coldham's body had been found in the woods, a single gunshot wound to the chest. Constable Ernest Tibbs, a portly man with a reputation for being overly thorough, was assigned to the case. He approached it with the same diligence he applied to finding lost cats or mediating disputes over garden hedges. Murder wasn't a common occurrence in Marlow. Most believed it must have been an accident. Perhaps a poacher mistaken Horace for game. But Tibbs, while unremarkable in many respects, had a keen sense for when things weren't quite right. He visited Coldham Manor, first to inform the family of the tragedy. Reginald was already there, offering his sympathies to Horace's widow Martha. Reginald played the part of the grieving brother convincingly. He stayed at the manor most of the day, ensuring he was seen by as many people as possible. Tibbs asked a few routine questions, which Reginald answered calmly. Everything had gone according to plan. That evening, as Reginald sat alone in his shop inspecting an old pocket watch, the bell over the door jingled. Tibbs had arrived, his round face more serious than usual. "I just got a few more questions for you, Mr. Coldham," Tibbs said, looking around the cluttered shop. His eyes lingered on the clocks, ticking in unison. "Of course, Constable," Reginald said, masking his impatience. "Curious thing, you see. Your brother was shot with an old hunting rifle. Not the kind anyone would just have lying around these days. I was wondering if you might know anyone with an interest in such things." Reginald's pulse quickened, but he remained outwardly calm. "I'm afraid not, Constable. I'm more interested in repairing clocks than rifles." Of course, Tibbs said. His tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Part 3. The Clockwork Alibi. Reginald knew that Tibbs was not someone to underestimate. Despite his seemingly slow demeanor, the constable had an annoying habit of digging deeper than most. Over the next few days, Tibbs began asking more probing questions, not just of Reginald, but of everyone who had been in contact with Horace. One evening, after a particularly tense conversation with Tibbs, Reginald returned to his shop, stared at the array of clocks on his wall. Time. He'd always mastered it, controlled it, bent it to his will. But now it felt as though time were closing in on him. Like the ticking of the clocks was no longer comforting, but ominous. The key to surviving Tibbs's scrutiny, Reginald realized, was to further distance himself from the murder weapon. The constable could never prove the rifle was his. He would be safe. Reginald concocted a new story, one in which he had seen a stranger loitering near the woods on the evening of Horace's murder. Perhaps a disgruntled tenant, or a poacher, someone who had a grudge against his brother. He would plant the idea in Tibbs's mind subtly, without appearing to divert suspicion. Tibbs wasn't as easily misled as Reginald had hoped. Constable had started to piece together a timeline. Though Reginald had been seen by multiple witnesses after the murder, Tibbs couldn't shake the feeling that something about the Clockmaker's story was too neat, too well rehearsed. Tibbs began visiting the Red Lion and speaking with the locals. One regular recalled seeing Reginald near the woods that evening, much closer to the time of Horace's death than Reginald had admitted. It wasn't long before Tibbs made an unexpected discovery. Reginald had attended an auction a few months prior, one known for selling rare firearms. Part 4. The Unraveling. Revelation about the auction gave Tibbs the final piece of the puzzle he needed. He returned to Coldham's Clockworks on a stormy afternoon, bringing with him an air of quiet determination. Reginald, who had begun to sense that his careful plan was crumbling, greeted him with feigned cheerfulness. "Found something interesting, Mr. Coldham," Tibbs began, eyeing the array of clocks with the same unnerving calm. "Seems you were at the auction a few months back, one that dealt in more than just timepieces." Reginald's heart raced, but he maintained his composure. "I do enjoy collecting the odd antique, Constable. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything." "It has to do with the rifle used to kill your brother," Tibbs said, his voice cool. "Seems that rifle was sold at the very auction you attended. A remarkable coincidence, wouldn't you say?" Reginald tried to muster a response, but the words stuck in his throat. Clocks around them continued their relentless ticking, still mocking him. Tibbs took a step closer. "You're a clever man, Mr. Coldham. Planned this all quite carefully. But in the end, time caught up with you." Reginald's carefully crafted facade cracked. He realized in that moment that Tibbs had outmaneuvered him, not through brilliance, through persistence. The constable had simply waited patiently as Reginald's own mistakes accumulated. And now time had run out. The story ends with Reginald being arrested, his cold, calculated plan undone by the very thing he'd spent his life mastering: time. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoy these videos and podcasts, please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast, available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Don't forget to tune in daily for new episodes.